Old Grognard says, let's take a quick look at the rules book for AD&D 2nd Edition's Dark Sun setting. There have been a lot of videos made over the years related to Dark Sun. Most of them, from what I've seen, are overviews of the setting, lore, or opinion videos. Even I did one of those back in 2023. What I haven't seen are videos that cover the rules that make the setting work in its own weird, unique Dark Sun sort of way. Covering rules is what I do on this channel, and so it makes sense that if I'm going to do that, I should start with the rules book. The rules book itself is softcover and 96 pages long. Generally speaking, core game engine components like THAC0 and saving throws work the same as they do in regular D&D, but things like character races, classes, and equipment all have their own rules, and it's a good idea to read what the rules book says before assuming anything. Since this was my first D&D setting, it had the effect of making me see D&D as a game engine rather than a game, and as I cover elements of Dark Sun, even if you don't agree with me on that, you'll probably see where I'm coming from. The plan with Dark Sun is to cover specific elements in future videos, but for now I'm just going to do a general overview of what the rules book contains, starting with Chapter 1, Ability Scores. Ability scores on Athos run from 5 to 20, rather than the usual 3 to 18. This is before modifiers, so characters with ability scores of 20 or more are not uncommon. These ability scores are rolled using a bunch of D4s instead of D6s, and if you're interested in how that works, I've already uploaded the second video in the Dark Sun Rules Book series, and the link is in the description. It's also in the cards at the end of the video, and as I make more videos in this series, I'll also add them to the Dark Sun Rules Book playlist. Anyways, let's move on to player character races. There are 8 player character races in this setting. We have Dark Sun's version of dwarves, elves, half-elves, halflings, and humans, and then half-giants, moles, and Thri-kreen. As far as I know, the half-giants and moles are unique to this setting, but the Thri-kreen predate Dark Sun. Athos has its own version of most of the character classes, but it's a good idea to read the descriptions in the rules book before we assume anything. In the warrior classes, we can see that the paladin is nowhere to be found, and in its place we have the gladiator. This is its own character class and not to be confused with the kit from the Splat books. Wizards are divided into 3 groups: preservers, defilers, and illusionists. Preservers work pretty much like wizards do in the PHB, but defilers have some extra stuff going on. They basically wreck the environment, but also take fewer XPs to go up levels. Either of these can be specialty wizards. This means that you can have preserver necromancers, defiler evokers. You get the idea. The illusionist is listed separately and can be either a defiler or a preserver. Humans, elves, half-elves, and halflings can all be illusionists, and the change in allowed races versus the base game is probably why they listed it separately from the other specialty wizards. The priest classes are a radical departure from what we have in most settings. Athos is a land without gods, so priests get their power from other sources. Clerics get their power from one of the 4 elements. Druids get their power from spirits that inhabit certain geographical locations. A third priest class exists on Athos, and that's the Templar. They get their power from worshipping the Sorcerer King they serve. They lose this power if the Sorcerer King dies, or if the Sorcerer King just feels like cutting them off. The rogue classes, Bard and Thief, also exist on Athos. The Thief is mostly similar to the Thief in the PHB, but the Bard is not. They have looser restrictions on weapons and armor, and have all 8 Thief skills. They're also masters of poison, but on the downside, they don't have any spellcasting ability. The Psionicist is the last character class the rules book covers. The big difference between how psionicists are covered in this setting versus most others is that psionicists are a core class and not optional. They also get a boost in that any race can be a psionicist and they have no level limits. They can also be part of multi-class combinations that aren't allowed in the Complete Psionics Handbook, and those are listed on pages 38 and 39. While we're on the subject of multiclassing, the multi-class combinations in this setting are generally less restrictive than what we have in other settings, and again, this is explained on pages 38 and 39. The last item under character classes is something called a character tree, and I won't get into detail on it, but it's a system that allows a player to have up to 3 reserve characters in addition to the one they're currently playing. In between adventures, or whenever the DM feels it's appropriate, the player can swap between characters, and this also comes into play whenever a character dies. Character trees really deserve their own video, and so let's move on to the next section, alignment. Alignment works pretty much like it does anywhere else, but in this section they cover how alignment works in desperate situations, like if the characters are running out of water. In Dark Sun, this is a real danger, so it's good that they give the DM some guidelines on how to handle it rather than just being like, figure it out. In Dark Sun, non-weapon proficiencies are standard and not an optional rule. There are also rules for how existing proficiencies work in relation to the setting, and there are also some new ones. They work pretty much like any other non-weapon proficiency, though some of them are interesting and might be worth talking about in a future video. The next big change from the base game is what we see in Chapter 6, Money and Equipment. Money and equipment are one of the biggest departures from what we see in other settings. Most folks know about how metal is scarce in Dark Sun. The TLDR version of how this works is that characters start with 1% of the money they would normally get. This is somewhat offset by having non-metal items cost 1% of what they normally do. However, metal items are full price. I plan on doing a future video with a more in-depth explanation of how this works, so if it doesn't make sense now, hopefully it will then. The next chapter talks about how magic works. Priest spells are reorganized into 5 spheres, which are the 4 elemental spheres of fire, earth, water, and air, and a 5th sphere that covers non-elemental spells. This sphere is called Cosmos. Major and minor access to these spheres is different based on what kind of priest is trying to access them. It also talks about how defiler magic works in the game, and then talks about magic items. From this point forward, the rules book becomes more Dungeon Master oriented, talking about how to award XP, how to run combat with a section on how gladiatorial contests work, and other DM-facing material like encounters, overland travel, and treasure. The last chapter in the book has new spells that were created for the setting, along with rules for how existing spells function differently compared to how they work in a standard setting. Alright, we made it to the end of the book. As always, if you have any questions, please ask. If there's a particular topic you'd like to see in a future video, let me know in the comments. The plan for right now is to start at the front of the book and work my way back, but if there's a lot of demand for something, I might skip to whatever that is and then come back to where I left off. Thanks for watching. Underwater lizard fish person and I would like to wish you a wonderful rest of your day.